Before I start the show, I want to mention my AWS S3 command line course from Udemy. You can get that with 20% off using the link in the show notes below. So if you're manipulating AWS S3 buckets via the command line, then do check that out. Also, a massive thank you to all of the Patreon supporters for supporting How to Code Well. If you want to support the channel and if you want to get early access to some of the content, then please consider becoming a Patreon. Link to that in the show notes as well. Okay, let's get on with the show. Hello coders and welcome to another How to Code Well podcast. Today I want to be talking about some of the courses that I'm planning for How to Code Well. We've recently published a course that is designed for beginners, and it's a HTML, CSS and JavaScript course. You're building a tip calculator, and this is a 3-part course. So I'm going to be talking about that a little bit, but then I want to be talking about the other courses that I have planned as well. First of all, though, let's discuss why I'm actually building these courses, because these are slightly different to the usual tutorials that I have on How to Code Well. Usually How to Code Well has a tutorial specifically on a certain function or a certain programming concept rather than actually project-based stuff. This is what I want to slowly move into over the coming months and years, making more project-based applications that you can use in your portfolios. I think I've got enough content now to teach the fundamentals of certain aspects of programming, such as if statements, control flows, object orientation, the JavaScript mechanisms, HTML markup, all of that stuff is kind of being covered. So now we're moving into the more project-based stuff. And as I said, this one teaches you how to build a tip calculator using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. This one is pretty beginner-friendly, so you can access it without much knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But what I would like to do is progress into more difficult and technical projects that require some prior knowledge to actually sort of take on the course. So I want to be focusing on things like React projects. I want to be focusing on projects that require certain frameworks, certain understanding of the basics of ORMs, connecting to the database, that kind of stuff. Now, I know that building a tip calculator in JavaScript isn't the most sexiest of projects, but this teaches the fundamentals of certain principles of web development, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I'm not using any frameworks here. You're not going to be learning Vue or React with these. And I've done this on purpose because many coders, when they're new to this industry, they'll jump on the new shiny toy, the new shiny framework, be it React or Vue or, years ago it would be jQuery, without actually learning the fundamentals first. And of course, this doesn't just cover JavaScript, this covers HTML and CSS. And we go through those in granular detail too. In fact, the first tutorial is probably about 15 minutes long. And then after that, it's 19. And then the JavaScript is well over 30 minutes. So it covers a huge amount. And this is kind of where I want the foundations of these projects to begin. And then after that, we're going to be working on some more, I guess you would say, complicated, more sort of trendy projects that use certain different things. I was actually thinking that perhaps in the future we could convert this JavaScript calculator into a mobile app or even into an Electron app. But I wouldn't be building the Electron app or mobile app first. We would build the actual app first and go through the basics of those JavaScript, CSS, and HTML principles. The course is available. It's in the show notes below, and the code is available too for the Patreons. I will put this onto the howtocodewell.net website once that is launched, and you'll be able to get the code from there too. So, moving on to the future of How to Code Well, where do I want these tutorials and courses to fit? Because now we're moving into this project-based sort of thing? Well, I'm not going to drop the single tutorials. We've still got a lot to go through. And in fact, I'm covering at the moment all of the PHP array functions and all of the JavaScript array functions in their own courses too. But we're not building any kind of project around those. It's just teaching you the function calls and how to use those. Now, I know that those tutorials are not the sexy tutorials either, because they're not teaching you how to use components in React. But again, you need to learn those methods, those inbuilt features of JavaScript. So those things are still going to continue, and obviously the PHP stuff as well. And then what I'll be doing is producing these courses and then just dropping them whenever I can onto YouTube. And when I say dropping them onto YouTube, what I mean is that for a whole week, it's going to be just that one project, like the project that we've just built here. Monday, it's going to be the introduction. Tuesday, it's going to be HTML tutorial. Wednesday, it's going to be the CSS side of it. And by Thursday, you'll be learning JavaScript and building that final application. That's kind of how I want this to continue to go. So sometimes you'll be seeing the odd tutorial here and there, and that will be mapped to a big, larger course that covers specific parts of certain programming languages. And then you'll see a full course dropped in a single week. And I've managed to map this out to about 4 tutorials per course, which is something actually quite difficult to do. So first of all, HTML. Second day is CSS. Third day is JavaScript. Fourth day is perhaps tidy up. And when we get to the more complicated stuff, then we're probably going to span it over multiple weeks, because there's going to be far more involved. Another thing I should say is that the tutorials in the course are far larger than the tutorials in the courses that cover the fundamentals of certain things. It doesn't take as long to explain and to teach, say, a single JavaScript method, but obviously it takes far longer to teach how to actually build an application in JavaScript. And I'm not looking to use Udemy or Skillshare or anything like that for this. This is the first ever project that's going to go onto the howtocodewell.net website. Ideally, I would like to have 3 courses, project-based courses, on there by the time we launch. That would be epic. So what kind of project-based courses will I be building? This is a challenge for a content creator such as myself, because you want to make sure that you're covering as much as you possibly can do without going into too much detail on one thing and not enough on another thing. You also don't want to be teaching the same thing again and again and again, just with a different skin on top of it. And I've narrowed it down to about 3 future courses, and I've listed these into our Discord server. You can join using the link in the show notes below, and people are voting at the moment in the Discord server on which course they would like me to build first. I'm going to talk about these three courses that I've got an idea for. The first one is a PHP-based course. It will teach you how to import a CSV file into a database. We're going to be using MySQL, and we'll be using a Symfony console script. So it's going to read a CSV and it's going to populate a database based on the records. Now, the kicker here is that there's going to be thousands and thousands of records in a CSV. This means that we need to deal with performance-based issues. So this one requires you to have some knowledge on MySQL and Doctrine and Symfony. So it's not really a beginner-friendly thing, but this is something that is often used in the day-to-day activities of a web developer. The second one is more of a beginner-friendly course. This is teaching how to build an accordion menu. You know, those menus that sort of open and close and you can see sub-items within that. How to create an accordion menu using JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. It's going to be, again, very beginner-friendly. I will be focusing on some very beginner stuff, the fundamentals of some of those areas in that course. The third course, however, is a little bit more sort of trendy, if you will. And this is kind of off of the back of what I want to do anyway for How to Code Well. So I thought, why not build this as a course? And this is to create an RSS reader using React. So we'll be building a component that will read an RSS feed and then produce a list of content. And perhaps we'll use pagination. I haven't decided yet, but it's going to be an interesting one. And this is what I'm going to be using for part of the How to Code Well website when I want to read the podcast RSS feed. So if any of those courses do interest you, then please do vote on them in our Discord server. I've left a message in the general channel. Now, there's a comment that keeps being brought up when I list these things, and that is that maybe I should be doing something else, or maybe I should be doing a specific type of course because that will generate more views and be more tailored towards the YouTube algorithm because it's more trendy and stuff like that. That's all well and good, but it's not going to teach you how to code well, is it? It's just going to be the feed for YouTube and, the feeding of the machine. The stance that I want to take now is to have more of a back seat, perhaps, of YouTube. I don't want to be just giving YouTube what it wants. I want to be giving YouTube what I want and using YouTube as a distribution platform. And there's certain topics that YouTube prefers over other topics in this field, but I'm not really going to be using that as my guiding light as to what to do next. Really, this is community-based, hence the whole point of having this poll on the Discord server. But of course, saying that, I do take suggestions, so if you've got a suggestion, either let me know on the Discord server or send me a message on Twitter at HowToCodeWell. Something else that I wouldn't mind talking about today is PHP 8 and how that affects How to Code Well, or how to Code Well is going to incorporate PHP 8 into its system, because I was asked, about that. PHP 8 is, I can't wait for that. I cannot wait for that version to come in. It is a breaking changes version. It's a major version. So this needs to be treated really cautiously, right? In kitty gloves. And I can just see in the freelance space there's going to be a lot of work involved with certain projects to get them up to PHP 8 compatibility. Obviously, we also have the challenges with the Windows stuff too that I talked about in a previous podcast. So there's going to be a little bit of work there too, I would imagine. But in terms of how to code well, in terms of what I want to do and push this up to PHP 8, I would love to download the Docker images because they are there and they are available, and then try them out. The challenge that I've got is just time. This is something that I didn't really anticipate doing in this project for this release. So we're probably going to be looking at after this launches, but I would love before Christmas to actually get a Docker image together and then test it out. And I would love to use the JIT, and I would love to time certain scripts and unit tests and other bits and pieces and compare them against PHP 7.4 and PHP 8. We've recently in the last few months, we've jumped onto the PHP 7.4 bandwagon, and there's still a number of things that I need to do in the actual project to get those files up to PHP 7.4. PHP Stan is very happy at level 8. All the unit tests, all the acceptance tests, and the API tests are working, so I know the site is running as it should do. But I can just see that there's going to be a bunch of things that I need to prepare and alter for PHP 8. Things that I'm happy to do. For example, the constructor promotion stuff. That's fantastic. And other bits and pieces like that too. There's going to be a lot of code that gets reduced and removed because of the move to PHP 8, and I'm dead excited about that. So yes, it's on the roadmap, but it's on the roadmap for 2021 rather than 2020. And whilst we're on the subject, let's talk about the howtocodewell.net website and how that's going. So I'm building this obviously on Twitch and, in the evenings and weekends. That is going pretty well. In fact, what we've done is, because we've got so far with the content stocking, that was supposed to be scheduled in September, but we brought that forward. Because we've covered that, or most of that, it means that we can do an early launch. And I'm thinking about doing a beta rollout around sort of the midpoint of August. So I'll be talking about that more when that happens. And that's going to be a very slimmed down version of the minimum viable product that we sort of laid out right at the start of this project. Very, very streamlined to the point where it's just going to be a collection of my courses and then links off to those particular playlists. So it's not really going to have the interactivity and the user interactivity that we were talking about or have been talking about and demonstrating on Twitch. That is going to be rolled out in the coming months. And the reason to bring the launch or the beta rollout forward is because I need to get the deployment scripts, the backup scripts, the whole building of a production-based server done. And I don't want to do that right at the last minute. So by the time we get to December, by the time all the features that we listed out in the roadmap have been built, I would have liked to have done many, many, many deployments to production. And therefore, when we get to that point, I know for a fact that the production deployment scripts work. So I think what's going to happen in the next few months is going to be a series of pain that I'm going to put myself through in order to get those things built, the production stuff ready. But that's pain that I'm going to do now rather than feel later on. This means that it's less of a big bang release. Thank you ever so much for watching on the YouTubes and listening on the podcasts. I hope to see you on Sunday at 14:30 British summertime on Twitch, because we're going to be building more on the howtocodewell.net website. Hope to see you then. Cheers. Happy coding.